It is officially time to move on from Mark Andrews. We'll explain why next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also listen to me over on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And joining me today, as always, is Michael Fabiano. You can follow him on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. Check out all of his work over on SI. And Fabs, on today's show, we're going to be talking about your tight end rankings compared to the tight end ADP that we have from Dynasty League Football. We're going to tell you some players to sell, a couple young tight ends to buy. But before we do that, I want to start at the very top at the tight end position with Brock Bowers, because he's clearly the tight end one. And you and I were discussing this pre-show, but is Brock Bowers at tight end one? Is the gap between tight end one and tight end two bigger than any other position in fantasy football right now?
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, in a redraft's a little bit different because I think they're closer in value, but because Bowers is 22 and we're looking at a guy in Trey McBride who's 25, well, then you've got, that 3-year gap, and that's huge from a Dynasty League's perspective. So, yeah, I'd agree with you. In Dynasty, there certainly is that gap between 1 and 2 where you don't really see that at the other positions.
Which is why I'm wondering why Brock Bowers is, I don't want to say so low in startup drafts. He's going at 11th overall, but because of the gap being so big, why couldn't we justify him being a top 7, top 8 pick in our startup drafts? Like, I'm looking at players like Brian Thomas, who is 9th overall. I would just much rather have Brock Bowers on my team because of the advantage he gives you every single week at the tight end position.
Yeah, the argument can certainly be made. I think if there's one concern for people out there, it's that you're paying premium for what was an historical season. When you look at what Brock Bowers did last year, I mean, Marcus, it hasn't been done before. And this guy was phenomenal in terms of the most receptions for a rookie ever. It would have been Malik Neighbors, who also was last season. Of course, now you have 17 games, so things are a little bit skewed. But Brock Bowers is coming off an historical season. And we're going to talk about that on the program maybe later in the week and certainly throughout the year in terms of magical seasons and what people need to do in terms of where you draft those players, because you're drafting a player at the height of his statistical success. And even though Brock Bowers is a first-year player, it was last season, that stat line that he finished with was unbelievable, and people are going to be drafting him based on what he did last year, hoping that continues throughout the course of his career.
And that's okay. Like, that's to me like drafting Randy Moss after that 1998 season where he scored all those touchdowns. Like, I just think Brock Bowers.
Remind me of that.
Yeah, I know. I was.
Remember the game?
Well, I think first off, 8 on Thanksgiving, crying my eyes out. Yes, I remember that one well.
Yeah, what do you have? Like 3 catches for like 180 yards and
3
all the touchdowns. It was unbelievable. That was actually a great Thanksgiving Day game for Cowboys fans. If you remember, the game was fun. The result was not.
No.
And also, Randy Moss could have easily been a member of the Dallas Cowboys, but I digress.
All right, let's talk about some other tight ends. Right now, over on Dynasty League Football, Mark Andrews, tight end 8. He's dropped a little bit over the last 6 months or so. You have him at tight end 11 behind players like David Njoku, Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid. Is now the time to get out on Mark Andrews?
It's getting close to that time, Marcus. There's no question about that. He's going to be 30 when the season starts. And let's not forget, in the first 4 weeks of last year, he did nothing. He was getting cut in redrafts. 2 games, he didn't score a point. I remember just being completely befuddled and what the hell is going on with Mark Andrews? And obviously, he rebounded and he was very good in the second half, but he still averaged 11.1 points per game. That was his lowest total since his rookie year, and that was back in 2018. Also, keep in mind, Andrews is in the final year of his contract, and so is Isaiah Likely, coincidentally. So if you're the Ravens, who do you keep? Do you keep the guy who's going to be 31 going into next season, or Isaiah Likely, who's still in his mid 20s? I think he's 26 going into this season. That's a question. So
who's cheaper between the two? That's honestly with the Ravens with their salaries, it might end up being who's cheaper, and I don't think it's going to be Isaiah Likely.
So you think Likely will be more expensive than Andrews?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll find out about that, but I don't know what Likely's agent would have to stand on that because his stats have really not been all that great in his career because he's playing behind Andrews.
Yes, but I don't think Andrews is all that expensive relative to the other tight ends. But anyways, I don't want to get bogged down with contract stuff. I do want to point out that John Harbaugh said a couple days ago that he sees Isaiah Likely as being like an all-pro caliber player this season. And what we saw from him last year, and even in the postseason, he played really well in the postseason. I would have to assume this is no longer going to be an 80-20 split when Mark Andrews is healthy. It's probably going to be more of a 60-40 split, if not 50-50. And I was telling a couple people last year when we were watching some of these Ravens games early on, when Mark Andrews was banged up and just not playing a lot, that the offense felt so much faster when Likely was on the field and Andrews was off. I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore figures that out like at some point this year and Andrews just goes into a smaller role, maybe like the way Antonio Gates was like late in his career where, yeah, you bring him into the red zone and on third downs, but he's no longer the guy playing 1,000 snaps. That makes me nervous from somebody who's being ranked as a top 8 tight end right now.
Yeah, he's just too high on Dynasty League Fantasy. I really feel like he's probably entering maybe his last good productive season from a fantasy perspective.
Probably.
And when you look at what he did last season, scoring fewer than 12 points per game, you're starting to get into an area where, he may not even be a week in and week out fantasy starter next season.
No. Yeah, we'll see. And I think Baltimore was exploring trades for Mark Andrews this offseason. We got a couple of reports that they've dangled him out there and nobody came calling. Like I don't think there's a lot of interest in Mark Andrews around the league. Whereas someone like Isaiah Likely Fabs, he's young, he's athletic, he can block, he's really improved as a blocker, he can make plays after the catch. That's the type of guy that you want to bet on moving forward over the next 4 years. And my kind of question for you is how close are these two players for you in dynasty leagues? Like if you had the option between Andrews and Likely, which one would you prefer?
So when I'm going through my rankings, which you can find over at Sports Illustrated, I've got Andrews at 11 and I've got Likely at 16 right now. So there's a little bit of a difference. I think for me, the concern for me is that yes, Likely has flashed, but even when Mark Andrews was literally doing nothing in the first 4 weeks of last season, Likely never was able to usurp him. And that's been the case ever since he's been in the league. At some point, you would think that Likely's talent would take over. And as you mentioned a little bit earlier on, maybe it'll be closer in terms of, the snaps and the targets, et cetera, but it hasn't happened yet. And so that to me is a little bit of a concern. Also, what I just mentioned, they're both ending their tenures with the Ravens potentially in terms of their contracts coming up in 2026. So is either one of them on the roster moving forward? So there's a little bit of concern there too.
My guess is they'll keep it. They're going to keep one of them. I think
that's honestly what I would guess.
I think they're going to want to keep Likely because he's younger and more dynamic. But I could see a situation where if both these players hit the open market, it's likely that it just ends up commanding a lot more money because of his age. We'll see. I would prefer Likely straight up in dynasty leagues right now. I know he's never had a 500-yard season. I know the targets have been low, but I'm betting on the talent and the upside going into 2025. Let's talk about George Kittle. He's another hot button player in dynasty leagues. Is now the time to fade George Kittle? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. The NBA finals start on Thursday night. You guys know that I'm backing the Oklahoma City Thunder, although I think they're going to potentially sweep, maybe win in 5. Go check out the MVP odds. I think that's maybe where you can get the best value on this matchup. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. And make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are discussing Fabs' tight ends rankings. And let's go to George Kittle, who you have at tight end 7, whereas on Dynasty League Football, drafters have him as tight end 4, just behind Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and Sam Laporta. Even at the age of 31, Fabs, drafters still love George Kittle.
And it's a mistake. I mean, if you're looking at a guy who, potentially could give you one more good season, sure. Last year, he was great. He averaged almost 16 points per game. He was 3rd in fantasy points. Obviously, he's one of the top players at tight end. But as you mentioned, he's 31. He's going to be 32 in October. Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland need to be ranked ahead of him. Both of these guys have major upside. And here's a trend that you guys out there in Dynasty world need to consider. And Marcus knows I love historical stuff when it comes to the NFL and fantasy. So Kittle scored 237 fantasy points last season. Now, looking back in the Super Bowl era, only 3 tight ends. Travis Kelce's done it 3 times. Tony Gonzalez did it twice. Delaney Walker, surprisingly, did it once. Have scored that many points at age 31 or older. So now let's go to age 32, which again, Kittle would be 32 in October. Only 4 tight ends. We've seen Kelce do it 3 times. Tony Gonzalez do it 5 times. Antonio Gates did it once. And Wesley Walls did it once.
Yeah.
I've scored more than 200 points at age 32 or older. And of that trio, or excuse me, of those 5 players, there's only 3, only a trio. Kelce, Gonzalez, and Rob Gronkowski, and he only did it once in Tampa Bay, have averaged more than 14 points per game at age 32 or older. Which means what? Historically, George Kittle is likely on the verge of a statistical decline. And I get it. He was very good last season. We don't know what's going on with Brandon Ayuk and the knee injury. Will he be ready for week 1? Ricky Pearsall is banged up, and he's not going to be ready to go until training camp. So there's potentially a lot of targets to go for George Kittle. But, folks, you've got to look long-term. I have no problem with George Kittle in a redraft in 2025. What I'm worried about is long-term. And at tight end 4, ahead of some really young guys who have major upside, I just do not agree with what DLF has in terms of ADP data.
And I think most dynasty drafters can get behind the idea of, hey, take Colston Loveland, take Tyler Warren. Those guys are 21, 22 years old. Like, it's easy, right? The one that I don't understand how this player is being drafted not even just behind Kittle, but way behind Kittle, is TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson is 27 right now. Mm-hmm. He's in a really good offense. Now, the quarterback situation needs to be figured out, but we know Kevin O'Connell knows how to scheme up offense, right? And whenever Hawkinson has been healthy, he's produced like a top 5 tight end. Yep. He's now a full year removed from that ACL injury, actually more than, I think it's like 18 months removed. Mm-hmm. I would just prefer Hawkinson straight up because you're getting significantly younger, and I think they have about the same potential.
Agreed. I have Hawkinson ranked ahead of Kittle on my rankings over at Sports Illustrated. And, the guys that I have ahead of Kittle, I think they're all no-brainers. And so that's why at tight end 4, you're just looking at a player who potentially, if you look at the historical data that I just brought to you, is on the verge of a statistical decline either this year or maybe into 2026. And we're looking on the long game here, folks. Yep. And the long game does not look good for George Kittle.
we like Kittle a lot this year. I mean,
Yes.
obviously, we're going to rank him every single week as a top probably 5 tight end. It's just once you get past the age 32 season is where it really starts to tail off.
Mhm.
And George Kittle has managed to stay pretty healthy over the last couple of years.
Yep.
Early in his career, missed a lot of time, but this has been somebody who's been known to miss some time or try to play through injuries. I
Yeah.
wonder as we advance in his career what that's going to look like. Again, I think this year, Fabs, he's going to be fine, but moving
Right.
forward, it could be a little iffy.
Yeah, no question about that. And the players that I had mentioned in terms of the guys who were successful as they got into their age 32, 33 and beyond. I mean, we're talking about Hall of Fame caliber guys. We're talking about Travis Kelce. He's going to the Hall of Fame. We're talking about Tony Gonzalez, Hall of
Yep.
Fame. So George Kittle's been a very good player in his career. I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would get him ready for a bust in Canton, though.
Really quickly before we move on, we're going to talk about some young tight ends in a second. Travis Kelce is always a fascinating player for Dynasty, and it feels like this is probably the end. You have Travis Kelce at tight end 14, over on Dynasty League Football, tight end 13. If you are in a startup draft, is he just somebody that you're avoiding altogether?
Yeah, very likely. We're talking about a player who's going into his age, I want to say 36 season off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And his stats have dropped in 3 straight years. And, it's nothing against Travis Kelce, and you can make all the Taylor Swift jokes that you want to. But listen, age catches up with everybody. Okay, maybe not Tom Brady, but most people, right? And so Travis Kelce is just, he's still putting up good numbers. They're just not elite numbers anymore. And how much longer is Travis Kelce going to even play? He's going to be back this season. Does he come back for another year in 2026? What does his stats look like at that point? So, there are a lot of players I'd rather have over Travis Kelce. Now, again, when you're building a dynasty team, Marcus and I always talk about youth, and, that kind of thing. But you're going to end up having a mix of youth and veterans. So if tight end's a position that you don't fill early on, and Kelce's kind of floating around out there, and you take a shot, and hey, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, you still have a tight end 1 going into 2025, albeit not an elite type of guy.
No.
But then you also you draft Harold Fannin, you draft an Elijah Arroyo, you draft someone like that, a Terence Ferguson, a little bit, to sort of counter what Kelce's career arc is going to be, which is going downhill and potentially being a retired player maybe in the next year or two. And then at least you have that young player to take over for Kelce.
He's just really hard to rank because you have to put him in the early to middle teens, right? Because it's still Travis Kelce.
Right.
He's still going to be out on the field this year playing with Patrick Mahomes. And there's just very few tight ends that we feel comfortable starting every week. And he's one of them. But when push comes to shove in these rookie or in these startup drafts or trades, I just end up preferring a lot of these other tight ends, such as Mason Taylor, who we're going to talk about next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Buck Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Fabs, let's talk about some rookie tight ends. And actually, we're going to disagree a little bit here, but maybe not why you think. Mason Taylor is somebody you are very high on. Tight end 15 right now in your rankings, whereas in ADP, he's tight end 18. I agree with you having Mason Taylor this high. There's just another tight end I like a little bit more, but tell me why you're high on Mason Taylor here.
Well, first off, every sort of scenario that you're looking for in a dynasty tight end is present with Mason Taylor. He's got the bloodline, right? I mean, Jason Taylor is his dad. We all know Jason Taylor was a great defensive player.
We also know
Taylor had 3 good seasons at LSU. He actually earned a starting role there as a freshman, and his numbers weren't great, but he was playing with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, like for part of his collegiate career. And then last season, he graded out. He was the 16th best tight end in FBS based on PFF data.
Mm-hmm.
He was 6th in catches. He was 14th in receiving yards. He was very good in terms of his yards per route run at 1.23. He was 9th in average depth of target. And what do the Jets have right now in terms of pass catchers? I mean, it's Garrett Wilson. It's, maybe Alan Lazard. There's not much else. And Tyler Conklin's gone. So Taylor not only enters an offense where he's going to project to be the starter right away and learn the NFL game in year one, but he's also a player who potentially could be a big part of the Jets passing game. I'm not saying he's going to end up being Sam Laporta in year one, but I could certainly see him giving you 40 to 50 catches, 500 yards, maybe 5 touchdowns as a rookie, which is pretty good. I mean, every rookie tight end is not going to be as good as a Brock Bowers or a Sam Laporta. And I just like him long term because the opportunity is going to be there. And Justin Fields is like the third of the tight ends in the past. And I know we don't know if Justin Fields is going to be a long-term option for the Jets, but at least the next couple of years, he'll be there. So if you're looking for that young tight end who maybe, I don't know if he's flying under the radar, Marcus, but he's certainly not drawing the same sort of interest as Tyler Warren or Colson Loveland.
No. I remember sitting at my local coffee shop watching the Senior Bowl cut-ups that I had and just thinking, man, this guy is really smooth. Like, there's nothing flashy about his game. He's not like one of these big-time athletes or anything, but you watch him run routes, you watch him catch the ball, and he just does everything well. And I thought, this guy reminds me a lot of a young TJ Hawkinson who, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism, his hands are very good. I think it's going to take him a little bit to get up to the speed of the NFL, like it did with TJ Hawkinson. But you're talking about somebody who is very likely to lead the Jets in targets after Garrett Wilson. Like, sign me up. I think he is the type of tight end that you want to draft in the middle rounds to pair with someone like Travis Kelce. Like, if you can go Taylor, Kelce back to back, you use Kelce this year and then Taylor in 2026 and beyond. Like, that's a great way to fix your tight end position without having to spend a top pick.
Agreed. I'm right on board with you.
Now, having said all of that, Fabs, there's actually another tight end.
There's always like some drama after you make that statement. Having said that, Fabs,
I like Mason Taylor a lot. I really do. He's a really good football player. I just like Terence Ferguson a little bit better, who the Rams drafted inside the top 50 of the NFL draft this year. One of the reasons I like Terence Ferguson is he's not a blocker at all, which this is really funny. If the Rams are drafting you and you're not a blocker, what does that mean? It means that you're going to be on the field to catch passes. And Sean McVay has talked about he's got a plan for this guy out of the gate. He's going to know how to use him. Tyler Higbee likely on the last year of his deal with the Rams. Devontae Adams signed a 2-year deal, but it's really a 1-year deal. He could be gone. Puka Nacua has not been able to stay healthy through the first 2 years of his career. Plus, if you go back and look at his college track record, I just think Terence Ferguson is a really good receiving tight end, and those are the type of guys that we want to target in our league. Right now on Dynasty League Football, tight end 23, that is way too low. Way too low.
I would agree with you. I have him in the same ballpark in terms of the rankings, simply because he's got Higbee ahead of him for year one. And, Higbee is coming off a year where he didn't play a whole heck of a lot, right? I mean, he was injured. So, and he's an older tight end. So I'm on board with you. I like Ferguson too. I guess my concern is who's going to be the quarterback of the Rams long term. Matthew Stafford is getting getting older. I can't even say getting up there in age. I mean, he's already up there in age, right? That we've seen in the past where, Sean McVay is somewhat, do I want to stay a coach? Do I want to get into broadcasting? How long does he? That's me. And maybe I'm just like overthinking it, Marcus, which could be completely possible. But I see a few more sort of potential landmines for Ferguson that I do for Mason Taylor. But I do like Ferguson as well. So I'm on board with you there. I just think that Taylor's got a clearer path to workload and some other things with Ferguson and with the Rams that maybe concern me a little bit more.
Of course. I get the concerns about Matt Stafford. For most of Ferguson's career, he's not going to be catching passes from Matt Stafford. I understand that. I also just trust the Rams front office and coaching staff to figure it out. They've shown that they're going to be aggressive in going out and getting a quarterback, whether that's through a trade, whether it's to the draft or free agency. Like, they're not going to go through these long stretches of being bad at the position. So that in itself makes me feel better. But also when I look at some of the tight ends ahead of Ferguson, like an ADP, and I think, okay, if I had Terence Ferguson and someone offered me Pat Fryermuth for him straight up, you know how fast I would hit the decline button on that trade, Fabs? And that's how when I go through some of these rankings, like Fryermuth is being drafted 20 spots ahead of Ferguson in startup drafts, and that makes no sense to me. I think Ferguson, I would have him ahead of guys like Dallas Goedert, Pat Fryermuth, Evan Ingram, Travis Kelce. I just really like the talent here.
And I guess I would ask in terms of Fryermuth, who's still a young player. I mean, he's 26 years old. What about Fryermuth do you not like? And what do you like about Ferguson a little bit more?
Well,
Fryermuth could be the second most targeted player in Pittsburgh this season. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. I mean, right now it's Mason Rudolph, but he's still a pretty young tight end as well.
He's a young tight end, but we've seen him be in the NFL for 5 years now, and he's never given you the difference making numbers at the tight end position. Like, his production is very replaceable. And I just don't value that. I know there's some safety in having a guy that's going to be out there for a lot of snaps, but he's not a big touchdown scorer. He doesn't get a bunch of targets, and maybe that changes with Aaron Rodgers. I would just rather go for the guy that could potentially be a difference maker at the tight end position rather than the guy that gives me a top 14 floor.
You are so locked in to Aaron Rodgers being in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's like the deal has already been signed.
I know.
In fantasy, I hope it does. I know Steelers fans are like, I don't want him. Like, okay, you want Mason Rudolph to be your freaking quarterback, please.
Yeah. All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure you check out tomorrow's show. We talk a little Saquon Barkley and why he's overvalued in your Dynasty leagues. We'll also talk about a couple of players from last year who had massive seasons that you should consider fading. Follow Michael on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here on Friday.